There are moments in history that mark not only the triumph of human intellect, but also leave behind curses that no one can fully explain. On July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong took his first step onto the surface of the moon, all of humanity held its breath, witnessing a dream that had spanned millennia finally become reality. But ever since that monumental leap, those who have walked on the moon seem to have been shadowed by inexplicable misfortunes. Could it be that setting foot on the moon also meant stepping into a mysterious curse? In today's video, we will explore these hidden secrets that have yet to be fully revealed. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you might just change your luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. On July 20th, 1969, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, watching each moment of history unfold. At exactly 4:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the lunar module named Eagle, part of the Apollo 11 mission, gently landed on the Sea of Tranquility, nearly 380,000 kilometers away from Earth. In that moment, two astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, officially became the first humans to set foot on a celestial body beyond Earth. After nearly 6.5 hours of preparation, at 10:51 p.m. that same evening, Neil Armstrong, with his back turned toward the endless void, slowly descended the steps of the Eagle module. It took him a full 4 minutes to complete that short but sacred distance. Then, in a calm and steady voice, Armstrong uttered the words that would be forever recorded in the history of mankind. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Just 20 minutes after Armstrong set foot on the surface of the moon, Buzz Aldrin followed. The two men, bearing the hopes of humanity on their shoulders, embraced that moment like children. They skipped lightly, felt the soft, powdery dust that no human had ever touched, and hopped about like antelopes across an open plain. And then, when the mission was complete, when they returned in the glory of heroes praised by the entire world, Neil Armstrong began to show a change that defied easy explanation. He gradually became silent, withdrawn, even refusing interviews and avoiding the crowds. Not long afterward, the space hero left NASA, choosing instead to return to Ohio to live a simple life. Many rumors arose from this transformation. Some believed that Armstrong had seen things on the moon that he was not meant to see, things that might have shattered the entire system of values he once held dear. Others said that he had touched the highest peak a human being could reach, and that afterward, he no longer had any motivation to strive. However, it was not only Armstrong. Other astronauts who had set foot on the moon also experienced a series of inexplicable misfortunes. Some were struck by leukemia, others perished in accidents, and others lived the rest of their lives in depression and loneliness. Very few among them ever returned to a normal life after coming back. Is there a secret hidden behind that glorious light? To explain this, let us revisit history. In the early 1960s, the atmosphere across the world remained heavy with the lingering echoes of World War II and a new confrontation between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, had shifted to a different battlefield, outer space. In this fierce competition, every technological achievement and every advancement in space exploration was regarded as a strategic victory. The Soviet Union, with its overwhelming early accomplishments, quickly seized the upper hand. They had launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, into Earth's orbit. They had sent Yuri Gagarin, the first human being, into space. And to achieve these feats, the Soviets had never hesitated to pay the price with the lives of countless cosmonauts and engineers in a multitude of experimental trials. These silent tragedies never once diminished their ambitions. The catastrophic rocket explosion of 1960, which claimed the lives of more than 160 Soviet aerospace scientists, including Marshal Mitrofan Nedelin, only served to make the race even more relentless. Those losses also sowed deep, unspoken fears among the American public. If conquering space could cost the lives of the best and the brightest, was sending a man to the moon truly possible? Or was it merely a reckless dream? Amid this growing tension, many of the United States government's top scientific advisors, including Jerome Wiesner, President Kennedy's own advisor, bluntly warned against risking the lives of astronauts on such perilous missions. dark scenarios were painted. The drifting corpses of astronauts forever lost in the frigid void of space. Skeletal remains stranded on the moon's barren surface, with no possibility of rescue. And yet, on September 12, 1962, in defiance of those cautious voices, President Kennedy stood at the podium of Rice University in Texas and delivered words that would reverberate through history. "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." Amid thunderous applause, Kennedy did more than set a goal. He ignited a new flame in the American heart. The flame of daring to dream, daring to act, and daring to conquer the impossible. However, as fate often seems to delight in mocking those who dare to challenge it, tragedy struck. On January 27, 1967, during what should have been a routine ground test, the command module of Apollo 1 erupted into flames in a high-pressure, pure oxygen environment, killing 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, in a horrific instant on the launch pad. The accident not only stole away 3 courageous lives, but also dealt a painful blow to NASA's confidence and to the spirit of an entire nation. In the dark days that followed the Apollo 1 disaster, had anyone stood up and declared that within just 2 more years, mankind would indeed walk upon the moon, they would likely have been dismissed as a mad dreamer. And yet, through extraordinary resolve, through tens of thousands of hours of tireless labor by hundreds of thousands of engineers, scientists, and technicians across America, that impossible dream began to inch closer to reality. Throughout that time, Neil Armstrong, the quiet test pilot from Ohio, labored in steady preparation, step by step, drawing nearer to the destiny that history had chosen for him. In that long and arduous journey, choosing who would be the first person to set foot on the moon was far from a simple decision. For the first man to step out of the lunar module would not merely be an astronaut, he would become a living symbol for all humanity, a name etched forever into the pages of history. At first, many within NASA, including Buzz Aldrin himself, believed that he was the one deserving of that honor. In previous missions, it had been customary for the commander to remain aboard the ship while the lunar module pilot performed the extravehicular activity. With that precedent in mind, Aldrin was confident that he would be the first to step out of Eagle. However, everything changed after the Apollo 9 mission. Internal discussions at NASA began to take a different turn. They needed a symbol who was not only technically proficient, but also someone whose character embodied humility and composure. Someone who could preserve the purity of that moment, free from personal ambition. And so, the final decision was made. Neil Armstrong would be the first. When Buzz Aldrin received the news, he was taken aback, even disappointed. In a quiet effort to overturn the decision, Aldrin sought out his fellow lunar module pilots from Apollo 10 and 12, hoping to find sympathy and perhaps influence a change. But those private conversations only served to expose his personal ambitions more clearly, reinforcing NASA's confidence in their choice. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong showed no outward eagerness. He simply continued with his work, devoting all his mental and physical energy to the grueling training sessions. Armstrong believed that the mission must always come first, and that glory, if it came at all, should be a natural consequence, not an objective to be pursued. One particularly memorable event during training underscored why Armstrong was the chosen one. On May 6, 1968, during a simulation exercise involving the lunar module trainer at an altitude of about 30 meters, the control system suddenly malfunctioned. In that fragile instant between life and death, Armstrong remained calm, activated the ejection seat, deployed his parachute, and landed safely on the ground. Later, analyses showed that had Armstrong hesitated even half a second longer, the parachute would not have deployed in time, and a fatal outcome would have been inevitable. When a colleague later asked him about the incident, Armstrong simply shrugged with quiet composure and said, "Yes, I almost died." It was that very composure, that steadfastness amid a firestorm, that left NASA's leadership with no lingering doubts. Neil Armstrong was the only possible choice. Christopher Kraft, the director of NASA's Mission Control Center at the time, once remarked, "If Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man to walk on the moon, then no one else deserved to be. Armstrong never chased fame. He was not driven by personal ambition, but by a pure spirit of service to science and to the ideal of conquering the limits that humanity had never before dared to reach. On July 20th, 1969, as the lunar module Eagle separated from the command module Columbia and began its descent, millions around the world were glued to their screens, holding their breath as each moment slipped by. From more than 380,000 kilometers away, it felt as though the heartbeat of all humanity synchronized with the two small men who were, for the first time, risking their lives for a dream that had spanned millennia. However, behind the seemingly smooth execution of that event lay a series of breathless tensions that only those directly involved could truly understand. As Eagle approached the surface of the moon, the onboard computer quickly detected that the landing site had drifted by 6.4 kilometers from its original target. The designated area was strewn with jagged boulders and rough terrain, posing an immediate threat to the mission's safety. Sensing the looming danger, Neil Armstrong made a decision that few would dare to make in such a life-or-death moment. He disengaged the automatic landing system and switched to manual control. Sitting lower in the module, Buzz Aldrin could not see the obstacles ahead. Only Armstrong, from his higher vantage point, could clearly see the deadly field of rocks lying in wait. With astonishing calmness, Armstrong piloted the module, searching for a patch of flat ground suitable for a safe landing. When the remaining fuel could sustain only about 20 more seconds of flight, Armstrong finally found a relatively stable surface and gently brought Eagle down. At that moment, from the Eagle module, came the words that the world has long since memorized. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." In the Houston control room, the first few seconds passed in stunned silence before erupting into thunderous cheers. Meanwhile, inside the tiny module, Armstrong and Aldrin quietly shook hands across the control panel. However, that semi-manual landing had unintended consequences. Because the landing had been performed manually, Eagle's shock absorbers did not compress as they normally would. The module's 4 landing legs remained fully extended, making the exit from the module more than 1 meter higher than anticipated. In theory, that distance was not insurmountable, but within the confines of a bulky spacesuit and the moon's low gravity, stepping down from that unexpected height became a genuine challenge. Indeed, when Buzz Aldrin later descended, the imperfect landing caused the urine collection bag inside his suit to rupture. Throughout more than 21 hours on the moon's surface, Aldrin had to endure that awkward and unfortunate situation, becoming the first person in history to wet himself on a celestial body beyond Earth. Another fascinating detail is that the iconic photograph, the deep footprint pressed into the moon's dusty surface, was not actually Neil Armstrong's footprint. It was Buzz Aldrin's, captured by Armstrong as Aldrin stepped down after him. For that reason, many of the most famous images of Apollo 11 astronauts on the moon are, in fact, photographs taken by Armstrong of Aldrin, not the other way around. In just over 21 fleeting hours at Tranquility Base, Armstrong and Aldrin did not simply leave humanity's first footsteps on another world. They left behind hundreds of photographs, kilograms of lunar soil and rock samples, and scientific experiments whose legacy continues to inspire countless generations. But perhaps, in Armstrong's heart, the most important moment was not when he uttered the historic words, nor when he captured the famous footprint. It was when, in absolute silence, he lifted his eyes to the distant sky and saw the Earth, suspended like a delicate jewel in the endless blackness of space. That moment, perhaps, changed Neil Armstrong forever. On July 24th, 1969, after more than 8 historic days, the command module Columbia plunged into the waters of the Pacific Ocean, completing humanity's greatest voyage into space. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins returned safely to Earth, bringing with them not only samples of moon rocks and dust, but also the dreams that had long burned within the human heart. Aboard the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, when the 3 of them stepped back onto their homeland, they became living symbols, true heroes of their time. Yet few knew that behind that dazzling curtain of glory, they were also confronting silent fears. In the lingering concern over the possibility of bringing unknown lunar pathogens back to Earth, NASA immediately placed the 3 astronauts under a strict 21-day quarantine. In those first days, as the world remained intoxicated by the fever of victory, a lesser-known truth, only revealed later, quietly lingered in the background. President Richard Nixon, upon hearing the news of Eagle's successful landing, had already prepared a solemn eulogy titled, "In Event of Moon Disaster." That speech declared that if fate had not smiled, those 2 brave men would have rested forever upon the cold, desolate moon, as silent heroes who gave their lives for humanity's highest ideals. Fortunately, those somber words were never spoken aloud. When the quarantine ended, the heroes emerged before cameras and thousands of admiring eyes. They were honored by heads of state, welcomed with jubilant parades through major cities around the globe. In just 35 short days, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins visited 25 countries, receiving dozens of medals and being celebrated as ambassadors of hope. For most, that glory would have been the ultimate summit. But for Neil Armstrong, the blinding light of fame became an unbearable weight. A naturally reserved man, unaccustomed to the relentless spotlight, Armstrong began to feel suffocated by the very adoration the world heaped upon him. The whirlwind of press conferences, award ceremonies, and meetings with dignitaries gradually drew him inward. Armstrong understood deeply that the success of Apollo 11 was not his alone, but the result of tireless effort from over 400,000 engineers, scientists, and technicians. Yet before the public eye, all the glory seemed to converge solely upon him. Thus, in 1971, just 2 years after the historic flight, Neil Armstrong made a decision that stunned the world. He resigned from NASA. But even after stepping away from the stage lights, Armstrong could never truly escape the immense shadow he now carried. Even at the university where he later taught, students and faculty alike would seek him out, asking for autographs, for photographs, for the chance to simply touch the man who touched the moon. That patience, however, slowly wore thin when Armstrong discovered a harsh reality. Many of his autographs were being sold on the black market for thousands of dollars, turned into profit by opportunists. From that moment forward, Armstrong refused all autograph requests. As he himself put it, he only wished to do his job well and quietly step aside, leaving room for those who came after. But the world, after that singular moment of greatness, would never again allow him to live as an ordinary man. Even after stepping away from the glare of the media, Neil Armstrong's life could not escape the twists of fate that seemed destined for those who once set foot on the moon. In 1989, exactly 20 years after Eagle landed on the Sea of Tranquility, Armstrong, by then a man in his early 50s, was invited to attend a series of grand commemorative events. And then, after a long day filled with ceremonies and tributes, Armstrong returned home. The house was unusually spotless, as though it had just been meticulously cleaned. On the dining table, instead of a warm family dinner, there was only a short note left by the woman who had shared his life for 3 decades. On it, just a single, cold sentence: "Let's get a divorce." One can see the footprints etched into the surface of the moon, but no one can ever see the invisible wounds carved deep into the heart of a man once hailed by the entire world. After the painful divorce, Armstrong withdrew even further into himself. He purchased a small farm in Ohio and lived quietly, like a true farmer. In 2005, a minor but deeply bitter incident once again disturbed the humble life Armstrong had built. A close friend secretly collected clippings from Armstrong's haircut and sold them to a hair collector for $3,000. When Armstrong found out, he was furious. But the ordeal did not end there. The collector, with astounding brazenness, declared that he possessed 250,000 strands of Armstrong's hair and began selling them, each one affixed to a postcard for $50 apiece. Once again, Neil Armstrong's name was turned into a commodity, bought and sold like merchandise. Life after the moon for Armstrong was not without its warm moments. Yet it could never fully erase the quiet losses, the silent scars. In one rare interview, Armstrong confessed that the greatest regret of his life was not the things he had done, but the things he had missed. The moments spent with family, the times he could have played with his children, The years he might have lived simply as a father, as a husband, like any ordinary man. Could it be that a mysterious curse clings to those who once set foot on the moon? For when we look back at the fates of the 12 astronauts who journeyed there under the Apollo program, it is difficult not to shudder at the string of tragedies that followed. Buzz Aldrin, the man who accompanied Armstrong in that historic landing, quickly descended into a spiral of depression and alcoholism after returning to Earth. Though once a talented Air Force officer and a courageous astronaut, the blinding light of fame left Aldrin lost and adrift. Pete Conrad, the man who walked on the moon during Apollo 12, survived his mission, only to later perish in a motorcycle accident in 1999 at the age of 69 on a long, straight stretch of road. Alan Shepard, the commander of Apollo 14, was no exception to fate's harsh hand. He succumbed to leukemia and passed away in 1998. And the tragedies were not limited to illness or accident. The 3 astronauts of Apollo 15, David Scott, James Irwin, and Alfred Worden, became entangled in a scandal after they secretly carried nearly 400 postal covers into space, intending to auction them for profit upon their return. Although their actions were not illegal, they constituted a serious violation of NASA's ethical rules, leading to the bitter end of their careers. James Irwin, who had once left his footprints on the moon, suffered devastating physical trials as well. During the mission itself, he endured a minor heart attack on the moon's surface. Later, Irwin spent the remainder of his life searching for the remains of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat in Turkey, embarking on a spiritual quest for redemption. He died in 1991, felled by another heart attack. Perhaps the most controversial figure among them was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut of Apollo 14. After returning from the moon, Mitchell firmly declared that he had witnessed numerous unidentified flying objects and believed that the US government was concealing the existence of extraterrestrial beings. In the final years of his life, Mitchell even claimed that peace-loving beings from another planet had intervened to prevent the Cold War from escalating into a full-scale nuclear catastrophe. To the scientific community, such statements sounded like delirium. Yet to those who believe in the mysterious and the unknown, Mitchell's testimony stood as living proof that the moon landing had opened a door to terrifying secrets for which humanity was not yet prepared. And, as if to affirm that haunting notion, one by one, the members of the Club of 12 who set foot on the moon each faced loss, illness, accidents, or inexplicable misfortunes. Could it be that the moon truly harbors a secret of its own? Neil Armstrong was no exception. In 2012, he passed away at the age of 82 due to complications following coronary bypass surgery. In one rare speech he gave at a commencement ceremony in 1982, Armstrong did not speak of the moon at all. Instead, he simply offered young graduates a gentle message: to believe, to forge ahead, and to always carry humility within their hearts. If today's story made you lift your eyes to the night sky with a different gaze, if it stirred within you a sense of wonder, pride, or even just a quiet moment of reflection on the mysteries and possible curses that surround those who once walked upon the moon, then let me know by leaving a comment down below. And if you would like to continue journeying with me through stories of hidden mysteries yet to be fully told, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Farewell for now, and I look forward to seeing you on the next journey.